There is a question that I often struggle with. As society progresses, we shift from villages to cities. Serene rural landscapes give way to congested urban streets, and green fields give way to polluted skies. In that context, I'm excited to share with you this conversation with Kalyan A, the founder of Protovillage, a fascinating prototype that offers clues as to an alternate development approach. I had first visited Protovillage in 2016. Returning in December 2023, when this was recorded, I witnessed its delightful growth. In this part 1, we trace Kalyan's journey from idea to action as he reflects on the gap between modern living and tribal wisdom. In part 2, we will delve deeper into Protovillage's journey in the last decade. Let's dive in. So, hi Kalyan. So, first of all, super excited to be here, and thank you so much for agreeing to this conversation.
Absolute pleasure, Girish.
So, before we begin, I think it'll be good if you could start with an introduction, just share about your journey.
Yeah, so I'm from a small town, which is about 25 kilometers from Proto Village right now. I grew up there, and I was homeschooled throughout. I never went to school till my 12th. I think that growing up with one teacher who felt I was worth investing all of his time on was the best gift I've ever received in my life. And then, of course, you join the bandwagon, go to engineering, then that pushes you to MBA, and all of those things happen. Then the recruitment fever. So worked with the corporate for a few years, and then decided when I turned 30, there seems to be something magical about 30. So once I reached 30, I was prompted by a friend to think about a question, which is, every weekend we would just meet across a table, have a beer, and talk about so many things about what's the purpose of life, what would we do if we were in that situation, how would we change this world, etc., etc. All talk, no action. And then when I turned 30, this friend asked me, how many years do you think you have to be socially productive? I thought about it for a second. I just said 30 more years if I remain fit. Right. And then that sounded like a lot of time. And the moment everybody said cheers, I took a tissue and then multiplied 30 with 365. 10,000, when you remove the details, you have 10,000 days staring at you. 10,000 days look much shorter than 30 years. And it looks a lot more finite. And so then I said, what am I doing with my life till now? When everybody was just wishing me happy birthday and all of that was happening, I felt, I'm spending 12 irreversible hours out of each of my irreversible days, out of my only life, trying to make a rich company richer. That was the net effect of my life at the time. So I thought that was a terrible waste of my potential. And when I talk about my potential, I had no idea what it was, because I was never pushed to a corner and forced to really understand what my potential was. So I thought, let me just push myself. Quit the company right away, and then didn't know what else to do. So I started traveling around the country, and I set a couple of conditions for myself. I said, I'm not going to pay for my food. I'm not going to pay for my stay. And what I thought would be an adventure for like a week or two or a month maybe, went on for 2.5 years. And to me, that was probably the education that I needed without me knowing. And what the country and the people and everything that I saw taught me was what eventually led me to do what I'm doing right now. So very quickly through the journey, can I?
Take your time, please. Yeah.
So what, right at the beginning, I very quickly realized that, living on those two conditions in a city is impossible. I mean, for example, you cannot go to Bangalore, stop by at Hebbal with your backpack and your sleeping bag and say, oh, I'm doing this trip, I don't want to pay money. No, nobody cares, really. Nobody has the time to care. So I starved in every city I passed through. So on one hand, you have all these cities which have every possible expression of progress. Right? You have theaters, you have malls, you have churches, you have hospitals, you have temples, you have every goddamn thing that defines progress, right? The so-called progress. And then you go hungry. And for the first time in my life, when I was not sitting in my car and driving in my car and waiting on the footpath for someone to just acknowledge my presence and ask me what I was doing and if I needed something, or if I found somebody who would be patient enough to just listen to me, I would get my food. So for the first time in my life, I started noticing all those people who I never ever noticed. So I started calling them the invisibles, right? And now I was part of the invisibles because nobody cares. I'm not judging anyone in the cities. They're all nice people and we're all nice people. But the thing is that that's how life gets framed. That's how it gets designed there. And so many people, so many animals, everything just gets ignored. The lovely sunsets, nobody has the time, right? So I thought if I have to not starve, then I have to try something else. And once I reached Hyderabad is where I got this conversation with an old couple who had left their village about 30 years prior to that, and they were living in front of the temple for all most of those 30 years. And when I was starving, the old lady just gave me the prasadam that she had. I sat down with her. We struck a conversation because she was like a mother, and who could sense that I was hungry, and then gave me food. And then we were talking, and then she gradually, both of them, the man and the wife, both of them were talking to me about how beautiful their village was. And that's when I began to realize if a village is as good as they say it is, I shouldn't go hungry there. So how about the next place I go to is a village? And as luck would have it, I was in one of the chai dukans, the Irani cafes in Hyderabad. Right. The guy who was sitting across, he said, "Aise baaton mein." I told him this is what I plan to do. I plan to just travel through the villages and all, and stay with people and not pay, and be useful to them. Then he said, "Do you want to come to my village?" I'm going all the way from Hyderabad to this place in Maharashtra. It will be a 17-hour drive. Would you be interested? I said, yeah, why not? So sign from the universe, and then it just kicked off. So the thing is, I said on one hand about the city, on the other, the places that kept me going on the road for 2.5 years were places I least expected. Right? They were the villages, and even in the villages, it was those people who had very little to, very little that they had, right? And you'd be amazed as to how happily they would share the little that they have. I can go on counting stories of what kind of stuff that they had, and even then, they would just share it because that's all they had, and they wouldn't even blink. And I felt I was so inspired by their stories of glory, courage, and all of these things. It was beautiful experience. And when I go to the social conferences as I pass through the cities, I mean the conferences about the state of the world and all of these things, people constantly talked about poverty line, bottom of the pyramid, and all of these things. And I was okay. What is this poverty line? And then all the dots below that line are the families that are actually feeding me. Right? Those are the kinds of families that were feeding me without a question, right? Probably without an expectation, just because they had something in them that was not valued by the poverty line, right? So they were just incidentally, what is that? Hold into that category of poor people, below, yeah, right? Below BPL. Poverty line, poor people. And somehow after a couple of experiences like that, I started feeling this is disgusting, because the whole jargon of that poverty thing, it was disgusting to me because it was not valuing the capability of people to give, to feel some other person's pain, right? The love, the generosity that people are capable of, all of that was just not getting valued, right? And it didn't make sense to just say, okay, if people can spend this amount of money for their survival, they're above. If they cannot spend that amount of money, they're below. All right. So the question then was, if all of us got together and made sure that we brought them all up to a state where everybody can spend that amount of money every day, right? It's theoretically possible. If we all actually put our minds together, it's not really impossible, right? If we get that there, will the line remain there? It will not. It'll move up.
Exactly.
Right? And then we all work hard again and we get them up there, it'll rise further. So what the hell are we chasing? Right? So that brings me to the idea of bottom of the pyramid. It's a beautiful term. I don't have a problem with the pyramid or its bottom, but the fact that I have a problem with is a pyramid will always have a bottom.
Yeah.
Right? No matter what you do, you dance on it, you do karate on it, whatever you do, you slice it a million times, it will still have a bottom. So the problem is not with the bottom. That's not where we should be working. We should be working on the pyramid, and we should dent it to such an extent that it loses its corners, it becomes a bloody circle, right? Because that's how nature was supposed to be. And I met snake charmers, I lived with healers, tribal healers, I lived with farmers, lived with all kinds of people. And what I realized is, one of the healers said, how much money do you need to live? I blabbered some number, for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, for entertainment, this and that. Then he said, you come with me. Takes me to his backyard hill, gets me to collect all the edible ferns and everything, and then comes home. The wife cooks a great meal. We all have it, and he laughed at me and he says, how much did you have to pay? And which other species do you see around you that is worried about quarter on quarter growth, right? And GDP growth and all. So to me, I started gradually realizing that, as an example, as an analogy, we built a boat many years ago, maybe about 400 years ago. We built a boat, an experimental one, and then no one was sure about it. Intentionally or otherwise, we left a hole in it, right? And in all the excitement and the hurry, we took the boat into the river. What would start happening? The water starts leaking in, right? And it would start flooding. So then everybody got worried, and someone had a brainwave, and that guy or that girl, just to be gender safe, someone would just stand up and say, okay, I've got a brilliant idea. I've got a mug. And then they start pouring the water out, and everybody claps, and then there are awards and recognition and all of that happens. And then the water starts flooding even more, right? And it just gets worse with time. So then the wise men, they start thinking, let's have a bigger group of people who do that job, right? Let's equip them with mugs and train them in how to use those mugs, pour the water out. So more people and more people, they get educated to pour the water out of the boat, while everyone else is just thinking, okay, now these guys are just working so hard, and let's do something for those people. Those are the poor people who are working to make our life comfortable, etc., etc. Those guys are slogging, right, and pouring all the water out. Suddenly the next generation of innovation comes, and they say, we cannot see all those poor people working so hard, it's the slavery footprint and all of that. So how about we invent a electric motor, right? We pour the water out much faster. And so over a period of time, we just kept focusing on pouring the water out, the larger and larger amounts of water out, faster and faster, and the water was flooding in faster and faster too, right? Then came, of course, green energy and all of these things, and we had solar pumps, and we were pouring the water out, and nobody took a pause to see what exactly is happening. Why do we need to pour the water out, when all we need to do is take the boat back onto the shore, accept that, okay, here are the things that have gone wrong, and let's plug the hole, or let's redesign the boat, and then take it to the water again. Let's test it, because it's a matter of all of our collective happiness. Yeah, and right? And survival. And I thought, it's such an obvious thing. I mean, we're just pouring the water out and recognizing ourselves for doing a great job and all of that, whereas that doesn't even matter, right? We're the only species that is constantly worried about how much money, whereas the rest of the universe seems to work on trust, right? I do my job, you do yours, so we can all coexist, right? There is economics there too, but our economic system, we've built it in such a way that if I have to win, you have to lose, right? And when I win, in fact, it's not fair. When I win, I get closer to the next opportunity. As a loser, you get farther away from the next opportunity, and that creates concentration, of wealth and precipitation of poverty and whatever else. And all of this is because of the boat, right? The hole in the boat. And I mean, all that's an example. Just so the thing is, I realized I don't want to spend my life. I definitely thought I should do something about it, but I was not inspired to work on poverty eradication. Not in the system that we have designed, in which poverty becomes a necessary consequence. And I didn't want to, of the social, of the economic structure, whatever. And so I was like, my mentor always used to talk about the purpose of martial arts. So he used to say, what is the purpose of martial arts? And I'd say, okay, it's self-defense. He'd say, no. And then you'd think harder and you'd say, all right, it is to defend weaker people. You cannot go wrong with that answer. Then you'd say, nope. So he would say the true purpose of martial arts is to create a world in which nobody has a reason to defend themselves. That sounded beautiful, right? So what if we contributed to the design of a world in which there is no need to eradicate poverty? And to me, that was the clearing, outside the woods. So I felt that is a space, that gives me a lot of light, and that's what I'm going to be working on. I'm working on the boat now. I'm not worried about the water. I'm not worried about anything else. I'm just working on the boat and the design. So I started telling people that I'm not interested in eradicating poverty. Imagine if you went to a conference and said that. The thing is, you're gently sent out. But the thing is that I was also shallow at the time, little less shallow or little more shallow than I am right now. The thing is, people would then immediately ask me, so what do you want to do? I'd say I want to help create a world in which poverty cannot exist, right? It cannot emerge. It sounded pretty good. People liked it, but then they would say, how will that world look and feel? And I had no idea. And that was skin deep intention. So I felt, but it's a worthwhile thing to pursue and to learn and to do it. And so just around the time when the intention was solidifying as to what I wanted to do with my life, as if it was a sign from the universe, I met a nomadic tribal family in Kutch on the western side of India. And that family showed me, demonstrated to me for the first time in my life what happiness meant. And so I felt, if I could learn so much about life in 1 week, living with one family from a tribe, maybe these are the kinds of people who can teach me how that world would look like. So I want to go learn from their world.
And how many months at what point in your journey was this?
So this was towards the end, the end of 2.5 years. Okay. And that's when I had met the nomadic tribe. I lived with them for about 10 days, walked with them, camped with them and all of that. It was great fun. And it was not like an adventure which was fun. It was absolute bliss, where you're stripped of all those things that are unnecessary, right? Non-essentials. And you feel so light and unburdened, and it was, you could see, right, for the first time. And that was very liberating for me. And I felt this is the path now. Here is what I need to do. Then I came back, did a few things, and then this time I was on a mission. For the first time in my life, I had a question: how would that world look and feel? If it is designed to not allow poverty to emerge or exist, it should be called resilient, right? So what does it take to build a resilient thing? Where in India can I find? And if I find one, what are the design principles? How did they organize themselves? How do they keep it going? So and then I went on this slow travel from Kutch towards Sundarbans, because in my research it told me that there are like scores of tribal colonies along that in that belt, and it was true. I met people from several tribal colonies there, and the conversations that I had were like so much like organized common sense, right? It was not genius material, right? It just it was like mocking at you, saying, how come you don't know this, right? I'll just summarize it with two statements. One is, and this is what I learned from the tribals, they say, what makes your life possible, right? I mean, yeah, the soil, air and water, right? And all the life that these three elements carry, that's what makes our life possible. Because every other life form, right from the cyanobacteria to the blue whale, everybody has a task, right? And they're just doing it religiously every single day, and that's why things happen that make our life possible, right? And what are we doing to soil, air and water, to the very things that make our life possible? We're destroying the very things that make our life possible. So it is stupid at best and suicidal at worst. And why can't we see it? And second is, the second question that they ask is, what makes your life meaningful? So I didn't have an answer. I thought that was a beer conversation. What makes our life meaningful? And that guy says, when you have people that love you and people that trust you to do something, and people who teach you how to trust other people, right? When you're surrounded by such a thing, you find meaning in your life, right? Because the meaning is knowing how to trust someone else, and how to help and support the other person just the way you received it, and make it even better. And in that endeavor you find your meaning, right? So a beautiful sense of, deep sense of community is what gives meaning to your life. What's happening to our sense of communities? Where do they exist? So what makes our life possible? Getting destroyed. What makes our life meaningful? Getting destroyed, getting disintegrated, right? What are we doing? And everybody is looking busy, right? So there is something fundamentally wrong about the boat. We're all busy, we're all slogging, we're all doing something, but destroying the very things that make our life possible and meaningful. And that's where I learned that the genius in simplicity, that the tribals just stick to those two things. The elements make our life possible. We pray to the elements, and we don't just go idol worship and all of that nonsense. We will actually bow down and live in such a way that our lifestyle shows respect to those elements. And second, we preserve our sense of community, right? Even we have our dead living with us, right? In terms of our sacred groves, whatever else, different traditions. I felt I was super inspired, and after spending a year along that belt, I could just zero in on three principles that was common across every tribe. And later on, in the past few years, I've had the privilege of meeting tribes from Amazon, tribes from Africa, and nowhere do you see any inconsistency. There is that homogeneity of wisdom, just like everywhere in nature. You put a dung beetle in from here in Africa, he would just do the same thing, right? There is that sense of purpose, and we don't have that thing. And I'm not complaining, because maybe we are the youngest on the planet. But the thing is, I realized they live by those three simple principles. The first one is, they strive to cause self-reliance within their community with respect to their basic needs. Yeah, they don't want anybody from outside to control their basic needs. their ability to fulfill their basic needs. That is their goal. The other two principles are like what they leverage to get to their goal. So the second principle is something that I realized to call interdependence, right? So they do not live with my space, your space, and all of these things. They live as a secure unit, right? Each of us has a role, and I become important when my role becomes necessary, right? A healer.
Say that again.
Yeah, my
I
don't know
become
what is.
important.
Yeah,
when
I
my
become important when my role becomes necessary to you.
Okay.
So, for example, if I'm a healer,
Hmm.
I'm not always having healer written on my forehead, and you treat me as a healer, you treat me.
Right.
No, I am important when you fall sick.
Right.
Right. Otherwise, I'm just one of the other guys who is part of the community, right? And so, when that is so, you immediately start seeing a circle.
Hmm.
Everybody gets their turn at being important, and everybody is important in that sense.
Hmm.
So there is a circle, right? And that is one beautiful thing, interdependence. So it's only when individuals depend on each other that as a collective they have any chance of becoming independent, right? Independent to a certain extent. Nothing can live independently. Even the planet is not independent, right? So the thing is that is the second, interdependence. And the third one is deep respect for soil, air, and water, and all of the life that the three elements carry. So
Reliance, interdependence, and respect
yeah.
for soil.
So what I did at the end of the 1 year, almost 1 year, was put the three principles together into forming a definition for resilience, which says a community is resilient when all the inhabitants practice harmonious interdependence and employ ecologically sustainable means to achieve self-reliance over not 3 basic needs, which the tribals are okay with, but 9 basic needs. And so I felt we had to do something. I cannot start by uh, promoting the wisdom of tribes in such a way that someone who is exposed to development detests. We have to find a middle ground somewhere, and do it in such a way that while you are talking about that world, the transition should not shock anybody. They're using the same tools, they're using everything that they know and they're comfortable using. They're doing exactly the same things probably, but everything that they do is repurposed. Now they're actually transitioning, right? Gradual way, not enforcing anything that is all sudden.
Right.
The thing is that in the exercise of poverty eradication, we don't start with the vision of how the world should be. We start with the idea of how the world should not be, right? We need to eradicate poverty, we need to eradicate. All right, so how will the world look without poverty, right? So that we don't have a picture of. So it's always an exercise of eradicating, eliminating, removing, and all of those things. And whereas the moment you start wanting to create something, you need to start with the vision of how the world ought to be, right? So that gives you immense amount of freedom to start imagining, right? And collect ideas, and it's a process of addition and eventually multiplication, right? So I love that idea. And then I was also happy with the definition of resilience, because you can apply that resilience to any context, right? People have basic needs irrespective where they are from, right? And it's about achieving that resilience in such a way that we are not harming the very things that keep us alive. So it all made sense to me. Now the only thing was that if we have to go from state A to state B being the desirable one, the envisioned one, we have to design the transition in such a way that it doesn't shock the participants, and that's very, very important. Now how do we learn to do all of these things, right? There are certain levers in state A that kind of influence the entire system, right? And by that I mean majority of the people are super used to and super comfortable with those levers, right? And they believe that okay, these are the things that need to be around, and these are the things that will make our life comfortable, etc., etc. If we disturb those things, then they undergo a lot of shock. So they resist the change and the transition.
So what sort of levers are we talking about?
I felt those levers are education and economy.
Got it.
But not in their current form.
This is a very proto-village situation.
So the thing is, once we realized that's the definition of resilience, I felt we should start with the prototype, right? And that's how the idea of Protovillage came about. But I had no skill, right? I'd seen videos on YouTube and other things, but I'd no skill at all. I didn't even know how to hold a spade. And so I decided to first try in Sundarbans itself. That's where my journey ended. And I thought, we could build Protovillage right there. Because all the people were affected by a crisis called the Ayla cyclone around that time. So people were just about, but yeah, 3 months there, all I did was eat a lot of fish. I was not useful at all.
Right.
Right. I mean, to ask for food and shelter is a different thing. To actually sit down and have communication about serious issues would require you to understand the language, speak that language, and be familiar with that culture. Right. And I wasn't aware of any of those things. So I thought a better thing would be to come down to my native district and figure out where I could do this. And that's how Protovillage came to Andhra. And then within my district there were like 1,000 villages. I went to about 166 of them with a checklist. Okay, check, and that kind of thing. And after 166 villages, I was bored of wandering about. I was so excited about starting something that I thought, what the hell? Let's just get started. And that was Tekulodu. And so 6 months I spent there trying to familiarize myself with the system as in the village. Right. I ate in a different house each day, and I did whatever they did for a living. And at the end of the day, my dad had given me a template of profit and loss account, and whatever you call it, even balance sheet and all of those things. So as to assess the financial health, the economic health of each and every family. And so in 6 months time, I had a reasonably authentic financial information of every family in the village and how it all adds up. Right? I knew the power centers in the village, I knew the social structure of the village, everything that I needed to know. And then I had a beautiful idea, or so I thought, but then I didn't have the means. So, but that should not stop you, right? I thought, if I can't do what I want to do at the village level, how about I just start with one family? So I picked up one of the poorest families. Their annual income at the time was 7,000 rupees. And
annual income?
Yeah, annual income was 7,000 rupees. And I convinced them somehow. They were planning to migrate to Bangalore. I thought if they would agree to let me be and let me work with them, and if we could just turn a few things around, then probably they might not need to migrate. And if I fail, and if we all collectively fail, then they know where to go. Right. All I was asking was for 1 year with nothing to lose for them. And so they agreed. So then began the work. I mean, it was an uncultivable land that we had. What I thought would happen in like 15 days, as naive, I'd only seen videos of farming on YouTube. I'd never done anything. It took us 9 months to make that land cultivable, and we started growing crops and all of that thing. And 3.5 years to stabilize.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and by the time they were stabilized, they were having a monthly income of about 14,000 rupees from 7,000 rupees a year. Now, that may seem like a big jump, but that was not what excited me. What excited me was to see the family being the happy one. They were generating all the electricity. they needed. They were growing all the food they ate, most of it, like salt and oil, obviously they had to go out. And they had a lot of time to themselves.
Lovely.
Right? So I felt an abundant system is something, or a resilient system is something that gives you that abundance of time, right? The irreversible currency, and tells you how probably to put it to good use.
So what all did you do there?
We, I mean, it was just the four of us. Yeah. The man, the farmer, his wife, who is also an excellent farmer, their kid, and myself.
Right.
And so we built the terraces. We, fertilized the soil with the cow dungs and all of those things.
Right.
Then, of course, we raised crops, the veggies, and all of those things. We built a handmade wind turbine. Because their land was right in between two hillocks,
so there was
the wind accelerates through their land. So we identified the spot and put up a little wind turbine, all handmade, open source design and everything. A friend of mine from Auroville had come down, stayed with us for a few weeks, set it up, and we all learned how to do it.
Right.
And so electricity was done. We built a house with earth bags from soil right there. It was a double-decker hut. A few of the visitors who would come, they would suddenly start calling it Mud Hayat. And I said, okay. So it was a cool little place, and it had a lot of space for them to play around. By the time it is 5 o'clock in the evening, the entire family was just out and playing with the kid. They had a lovely time, and so the wife of the farmer told me that the success is not 14,000 a month. The success is that we are having so much time with ourselves, and also that we don't have to go to the market so frequently.
Right.
Right. And I'm finding so much love in the family now. I'm happy, not in the same exact words, but
Sure.
but meaning the same thing. So I felt that is what a village stood for. Right. And somewhere along the way, in this whole tsunami of development and the so-called progress and all of that, we started losing the villageness.
Right.
That they ought to have represented. And I felt, that's why they say when you walk from a city to a village, life seems to slow down.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have a lot of time, and that's the beauty of it. And so
so this is the internship with the farmer that you
were
talking about?
Yes. 3.5, 4 years. And then that gave me a lot of confidence that these three principles were not doled out by some mawa drinking, ganja smoking freaks. They were actually wise people. And so these principles are not just ideals, they're actually super pragmatic and practical, and the only practical ones. So I felt now that we've experimented with just one family, and they're seemingly resilient, but their resilient is not solidified, right? You need a network of families. So how about we build a network of families and take the complexity to the next level? And that's when the prototype of a village came about. So we started with that definition of resilience, where I said harmonious interdependence, ecologically sustainable means, and self-reliance in 9 basic needs.
Right.
And those 9 basic needs are food and water security, shelter, clothing, health, energy, connectivity, disaster management, economy, and education.
Nice.
Right. And over the we started we bought this land. My wife gave up on me. She said, okay, now you don't seem to be coming to Bangalore now, so let us come there. So she was a serial entrepreneur. She sold her enterprise and everything. We bought the land, and I was happy I got the land to build the village, but none of this would happen if the kids ever said, we are not in.
Yeah.
So that's where I keep saying I've been blessed with some incredible people around me, and who never asked me to stop. Right, and that was amazing. And so we started work on this barren patch of land. You'd seen it earlier.
Yeah.
That was greener than we had got it.
Wow. Okay.
But now, as you see, there is a lot of vegetation, a lot of life.
Incredible.
Yeah, a lot of life. There's not a single blade of grass when we had stepped into the land. Now we have 75 or 80 unique species of birds here.
Wow.
We have tons of butterflies, tons of bees, and everybody seems to be healthy, and lots of green. And the land temperature has also come down drastically. And all these are beautiful side effects. So I might have gotten a lot of things wrong in the process of learning, but the one thing that I'm certain about is somewhere in this land, Earth is smiling a little bit, and that's something that really makes me happy. We're not connected to the grid. We've remained off grid right from day one. We worked on both economy and education for the last 7 years and built systems for both that we're happy with right now. If economy can incentivize you to do the right thing, something should tell you what the right thing to do is and how to do it. That should become the domain of education. We need to take that system and make it so easy for a villager to execute.